So we're gonna get started. Um, Thank you guys for joining us. This is kind of our first official training. And based on our last presentation, which I noticed at the end, I had the wrong date, so hopefully nobody was trying to log in a week ago. Apologies for that. But we're gonna talk about system admin training. Um, this is the first formal presentation we've done on system admin. And after going through some of the outline, building out our presentation for today, I realized that this really is two sessions. And so we're going to go through the first session today, and then in 2 weeks we will do 2.0. I really want to give everybody this training some attention since we hadn't recorded anything in the past. So there will be two of these sessions. Exciting. Um, so for today's agenda, overall system administration. Salesforce has a lot of back-end capabilities. One of the, as I've mentioned, probably one of the most brilliant things Salesforce did. They did two brilliant things. One, they made it non-code back-end, which I think is really great. So you don't have to be a uh, developer to go in and make subtle modifications. They made it very user friendly, plug and play, and they gave the access. So there's a lot of self-service capabilities. What we find over time is with our clients is, obviously things that we can add users, which we're going to talk about today, remove them, but also the second week, the second session, 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk about how you can go in as a system admin within your own org and add fields, remove fields from the page layouts, add them to the Lightning page, make the fields dynamic, and so on and so forth. So, what I usually explain to folks is that if I can do it, anybody can. I'm not a technical person. Don't tell anybody. I own a software company. But I've learned how to use it, right? And I came from your world. I was an agency owner when I first was introduced to Salesforce. So I found the back end system admin privileges once I learned how to use them super helpful so that I don't have to reach out every time I want to change where the field is on the page layout, adding users, etc. So hopefully these two sessions will be a great introduction to your system admins to be able to go in and start making those adjustments. And again, the orgs are yours. And so you have all those capabilities. Today, we're going to go through in great detail the user experience and the user settings behind the scenes in the setup. And we're going to explain the level of permissions that we give your users that we've been doing for you at this point, and why and how that can be pretty complex. For those of you we have built out a user matrix for, this is why, because there's lots of layers to Salesforce and giving access to your users. We'll talk through that. For more complex groups or orgs, we also may have enabled or added queues, groups, and even roles for visibility of certain records. Other features I'm going to go through today, Einstein Activity Capture, that's our Outlook or Gmail email integration, and we can manage those settings. The App Manager, which I'll explain why that might be helpful to know where that is and why. And obviously installed managed packages, which is what Benelinx is. So overall, general navigation. I'm going to walk through what visibility we have and what we're looking at. I'm going to pivot my screen so I can use my outline to kind of guide us through the presentation, so I don't have to go through the whole presentation here before we get started. The presentation will be available if you want that, but I'm going to pivot here so we can go through this together. So overall, like I said, open up my screen here. First thing is we're going to do general navigation today. I'm going to show you how to get in the back end and how system administrators are going to be able to go to the gear and see some of the back end settings. First and foremost, we're going to, like I said, we're going to focus on the user access and define who can have access and what, right? So system admins are going to have the ability to go in the back end. It's a very specific user, it's a very specific license, and it's a very specific profile. So not everybody, so just to reiterate, not every user can go into the back end and have access to the editing capabilities of the system. Only the system admins that have been designated in your particular org will have that very specific access. We go through that during onboarding, during a kickoff call. We designate one or two users to have that system admin access. Why don't we give more? The reason is because it's actually a higher level, more expensive license with Salesforce. So system admins have to have a full Salesforce license. And so we blend the pricing to give at least one or two of your users that system admin access. And so it's not just, I want to have five, even though I've got five people. It has to be very defined. And obviously based on size, the size of your org and the number of users, we give one to two. And that's the reasoning. So people are like, why are you withholding us having more? And that's just because it's a more expensive license for those system admins. They have to have access to everything. Okay. So that's the reasoning when you go in. Some people can go into the gear, but they can't do anything. It's because they don't have the right license and or profile. So when we go through onboarding, we talk a lot about, the buttons that we can and cannot use, right? One of them is the gear at the top right. We have different gears in the system. Different users can have access to managing different areas of the system with gears. You can see the gear there, which is, oops, sorry, which is for our list views. The big gear at the top is what takes us into the back end. Couple things about Salesforce. As always, there's ways to get into the back end that is getting us into the general setup, but we also have some quick links depending on where I'm at in the system. So I'm going to get to the same place in the back end, and one way is going general to setup, and I'm right now in an account in my list view, so I can jump right into editing this object. We'll talk more about this next week, but it's also important to know, just like anything, like I said, I can go into the setup and I can navigate to my object manager to get to the account object to edit the object, or I can go right to edit object. Even further, if I'm inside a record, if I go back to that gear, I've got even more quick links to get, quicker to the back end. I can still go through the setup, which is kind of a long way, right? But if I'm in an object, I can edit the account object that I'm in, and I can even edit the page, which this is designating a lightning page. So for today, we're going to go into the setup. This is the back end. So just like anything in Salesforce, like I tell you during onboarding, Salesforce tells us where we're at in the system based on highlighting and underlining. It's no different in the back end. So when I click on that gear, it's going to take me to my setup app, essentially. And it's going to tell me the default of the tabs or features that I'm in, and the default is home. If I pivot to the object manager, then that's taking me to a different feature, right? So by default, it's taking me to the home page. And then on the left-hand side, it's similar to your personal profile. We have a menu of options. And again, ways that we can learn how to use the system quicker, right? Is, going to be over time and experience. So today we're going to focus this presentation on what is available in that home tab. And there is a lot. We are not going to get through everything. That would take us probably months. But I'm going to highlight really key important areas to start as a basic system admin and the key areas you're going to focus on before you kind of accelerate into more of an advanced system admin. Next session, we're going to focus on Object Manager, in which some of you may go boo because you want to know how to move, fields around, add fields, change, what you see on the page layout. That is a whole session in and of itself, and I really wanted to dedicate some more time. So today we're going to focus on the homepage. There's a lot here. So when I click on the homepage, obviously on the left-hand side, we've got all of the different the features, and we've got a menu. And you can see as I scroll down, the defaults, this is usually closed, I was opening it today. You can see that there's a couple ways for me to find what I need within the Home tab. The first one is Quick Find. So if I know what I'm looking for, Einstein activity, I can start typing and it's going to start pulling up anything related to Einstein. And I'll show you this in a little bit, but the Einstein settings, I can take me right there. That's a little bit more advanced, right? The good and the bad of our quick find is that I need to know what I'm looking for. And I'll tell you again, like anything in Salesforce, it has to be exact, what we're searching for. Or you might think you're going into the package settings and you're going into the app settings. So the definition of what we're searching for is going to be needed. And so that's a little bit more advanced. But once you get comfortable with knowing exactly where you need to be, if I want to go to profiles, right, you can go there and it's going to advance you to that section without having to scroll down. In lieu of that, then you can see you can scroll and you can see that they've got things somewhat organized for us, right? Overarching kind of features, administration, we're going to spend some time in here, and I can open and close the menus. So users and users is gets us to our user list, which seems odd, but if you understand Salesforce, under users, there's all kinds of ways that we're going to access, grant permissions to our users that make more sense once you understand what this is all for. So opening and closing, general navigation here. I can open and close different features and I can start to see all of the information that I may or may not have access to. Again, this is going to be back-end system admin privileges. It is not just specific to Benelinx. It is not just specific to what you've purchased. So this is, kind of global sales cloud access. And so you're going to see things in here that you have not purchased, right? So be aware of that. As we keep scrolling, then you can see other features that we can open and close. So it's a lot. That's why I said today we're going to hyper focus on some key areas that you as a system admin are going to use probably 80% of the time. Okay. So the quick find versus the menu of options, open and close. Go ahead and, navigate through, get comfortable with what the features are. And again, once you get knowing where you're headed, then you can do that quick find. It really fast gets you to where you want to be. So general navigation of what we're looking at, right? Homepage, object manager, we'll talk about that next week. I'm in the homepage. What are the key elements that we're going to talk about today? I'm going to spend a significant amount of time talking about our user settings and how we set up a new user. How do we terminate a user, deactivate them, and what that looks like. Before we get into that, I do want to start with our company settings. So as an org, you can go all the way down to the bottom, and there's some important features here. Okay. Under settings, I have a variety of settings that are going to be important. You can scroll through and you can click through the ones that are obvious. You can set business hours. You can do calendar settings. The company information is the one I'm going to click on right now because there's some important features here. So information that might be really helpful, right? You as a system admin are setting some baseline company across the org baseline settings for everybody. For those that have gone through our, training, which everybody should, your user profile allows each user to adjust that. But there's some really important features here that if we set defaults, it makes it, adding new users a lot easier and it sets the baseline. And then users can adjust if their time zone is different. But as a company, you can set some of these items. First and foremost is going to be the default time zone. I opened my record as a company and I can change the default. If I go to Mountain Time, here's my Denver, and I set this for the org in general, that is going to be then the org-wide default time zone. When I go to add a new user then I'm not going to have to change that default unless it's different for that user. You notice that the default in Salesforce is Pacific. It's because they're from California. So the default is going to be their time zone. You can adjust it and change it. If you set it here, then every time you add a user, you're not going to have to adjust it there, unless, of course, they're in a different time zone. So default settings can be really helpful. Just help with getting it set, baseline, not having to go back later. Okay. Other pieces of information that are really helpful. If you ever submit a ticket or a case directly to Salesforce, this is your org ID. It's right here under company information. If we're submitting a case on your behalf, This is the org ID. This is the unique identifier that Salesforce has issued to your org, and that's how they can see what's going on in your particular system. And it lives under company info. Really important information to have. If you ever wanted to know what feature, what instance you're on with Salesforce, Salesforce just released their spring 2026 version. This is an identifier to know what version you're on with Salesforce. So really important details. You can go through all the other information, but if I scroll down, another real key area that is super helpful is our licenses. So we are issuing, let me back up. If you're an OEM client, meaning you bought Salesforce from Benelinx, then we issue you the licenses based on your contract and what you purchase. If you're an ISV client, you're going to Salesforce Direct to purchase the Salesforce licenses, and Benelinx is just managing the Benelinx managed package licenses. If you want to know what Salesforce licenses you have in your org, this is where you can go. Really helpful. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different licenses with Salesforce. The two main different licenses that we sell is what they call the Salesforce license, which is the full license. That's the system admin license. That's anybody that buys the Sales Cloud, the enhanced licenses to get access to the Sales Cloud. Okay. Everybody else that's functioning under the Benelinx agency management app has a platform license. Those are the two main licenses, and you can see the total purchased and how many have been used. This is really helpful from a system admin. How many do we have and how many have been used? That helps me know. I need to request more, right? Or we have extra because some people left and we haven't replaced them yet. So this is a great preview to give you an idea of total and how many are used. And I'm going to talk about how do I release those licenses when someone leaves to reallocate the use so we don't have users that are no longer with the company still under the use license count. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But those are the two really main areas within that company information. And again, if I go all the way to the top and I just want to scroll all the way down, it's going to be down here. I can get to the same place by simply typing in company information, right? And it's going to take me right there. Again, remembering the label is key. Okay, so here I So I wanted to talk about that before we backed into the users, because you can go in, you can update, you can see what we've already done for you. You can make some baseline changes. Okay. Oh, I want to go back one more time. Under company settings, I'm going to go back here. I do want to go through one other item. You can go through the rest of these features. We were just in the company information. Um, Obviously, you can set any one of these other items. If there's a situation, which we've had a few clients, to change their company name, right? Or they have a different need for a new domain name. Maybe they went from Benelinx.com to Benelinx.io. We usually try to mirror similar to what their website, their your business website is, but there are situations where people want us to change the domain. That is going to be your URL here at the top. So when you log in, what does it say? You can simply go in if you would like to change it. It's going to check what you want to change the domain to be. It's going to check for availability, and then you're going to be able to push an update. This is a pretty new feature, probably in the last couple of years, which is great. So now we have flexibility of changing that so it more closely matches what is representative of our agency. I will tell you what I find with Salesforce. If you buy Salesforce Direct, if you're an ISV client, you might get some random, URL. It has nothing to do with your business name. So this is where, a lot of our clients, when we go in, we'll change that for them. But, this is where we can now make an update without having to go all the way through Salesforce and submit a ticket. So check out those company settings. Obviously, there's a lot more here than what we just went through, but I highlighted the important ones that I felt were important for today. Okay. So now let's go back and let's go through overall our system administration and our users. So system administration and users. And as I had mentioned, when I go into the users and open that up, I have a lot of different options here. So we talk a little bit about Where do I find my user list? It's under users, under users. And that's because there's a lot of different, like I said, permissions that we can give to. So under users and users gives me a list. Before we go here, I want to back up to our user management settings. This is a newer feature. Again, Salesforce understands that adding users is pretty complicated. So they've added some features that you can enable and change how you view your user list, how we're managing profiles and permission settings. So you can enable and disable some of the components. What you're going to see today is our recommended settings now for how you're going to be able to see, for example, the user list. Okay, so it's a more modern version. If I toggle this off or on, it's going to change how I preview that user list. So if it doesn't look the same when you get into your org, go to your user management settings and enable and disable and see what the difference is and see which one you prefer. We've moved it to the newer version, so we can take a look at that today. But definitely read through all the different options of turning things on and off so that you know what you're looking at and how that will change when you go into those settings. If we now go to our user list, first thing you're going to notice if you're going in and looking at your particular org, that this might not look the same. Like I said, we enabled the enhanced user list settings. And the reason we did that, it's a little bit more user friendly, we found. Okay. You can toggle that off and it'll go back to the original. A couple improvements that we found with this list is that it's just like anywhere else in Salesforce. I preach about list views all the time. So we have the ability now to create a list view of our users. I want to see recently viewed. I want to see all my active. If I want to just see my admins, right? This is going to give me, especially with folks that have lots of users that have come and gone or just a large user list, this now gives me ability to really narrow down those lists of users and not have to look at all, kind of scroll through and filter. In addition, I can pin that so when I go back, to this list later, I'm not having to go back and it's going to default to, just like anywhere else in Salesforce. Okay. If you haven't heard my preaching lately, list views are critical, right? Even on the back end. So once we have our list, we can go through, right? We have the filters. Is it doing what I think it's doing? Does the filter match the label? Some of you are like, yep, Rachel, I've heard that before. I can then go to my list view gear and I can rename it. I can decide what fields I want on the page, which is really helpful. I can go and decide what fields do I want to see. Maybe instead of full name, I want to sort it by first name or last name first, so I can break it apart. Full name sometimes drives people crazy because Salesforce, I think, sorts it by first name. They're trying to be they're trying to be cool. So if I want to see the full name and I want to sort it by first or last, then you can see how I can break it apart. And now I can sort it by this column and it's not dependent on the full name. So one example of, wow, this makes my life a lot easier. As a system admin, I need to see my list of users. I need to see very specific information about those users. And now I have a lot more control over what I get to see as far as my user list. Okay. If I open up a user, right, we're going to be able to see a ton of information here. And again, this is all for all things Salesforce, right? So there's check boxes here that we may or may not apply or use because it's for all things Salesforce, right? In the Sales Cloud. So, we're going to highlight important information for you to determine kind of when you're building and creating a user, updating or managing, what to focus on. I'm going to walk you through the features of how do we set up successfully a new user and what boxes do we check. Things to look out for that I've talked about and I'm going to mention it again, is to note that we have two fields for email, one for email and one for our username. In a perfect world, when your users log into Salesforce for the first time, the default best practice is to have their username match their email address. Because then they don't have to think about it. Oh, my work email, my username matches, right? I can log in then with my password and I'm in. Salesforce doesn't do a very good job of purging old users in their system. So if you had done a trial in the past, you had used Salesforce in the past, you may still not be able to use your work email. Okay. It's important to note that there are two fields because you can see in this example, I've already used Rachel at Benelinx. We have an org, a Salesforce org internally we use. So that's being used already. So for this TSO, this is my testing org, then I can't use my work email. So I have to create a unique user to log in. And now this is how I'm going to log in for this org. It's going to be the Rachel.tso at Benelinx and then a password. Why is this important? Because you also still have your email. And it doesn't matter if that is a duplicate because I still need to get communication from the system sometimes, and the email has to stay the email. It doesn't have to be unique. The username has to be unique to the org. So you can see that doesn't it, in a perfect world it's the same, but if we have multiple orgs and or we've used in the past, then we have to create a username. So when you're building a new user, if you try to use the work email for your employee, and it says it's already taken, then you're going to have to put a one in there or ask the user what they would like as as their default user. Just knowing it's not going to interrupt any communication that comes because that email will still be their work email. Okay. Activating and deactivating. So people panic sometimes when someone leaves the company, deactivate that person right away. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, right? So as a system admin, you can go into the gear, you can go into the home, you can go down to users. You simply go into that user and you edit and you deactivate. Okay. I can't deactivate because I'm in as myself. So, and unless you're yourself, right? So anybody other than system admin, I simply uncheck the box, hit save, and that person is no longer has access to your system. It's that simple. That is the differentiator. That is the defining field, active and inactive. Okay. Simply deactivate them. One thing you won't see that we had a situation recently that there used to be a freeze, which would like freeze the account so they can't log in temporarily. We actually had that happen recently. There was a potential security breach that Salesforce had warned us of, so they froze it, and then we just simply, there was a button here that appeared that we could unfreeze. So if Salesforce is warning us that there might be something, dangerous going on with this user, they may freeze it. They sent out a notification. If you approve it, just unfreeze. There'll be a button here, unfreeze, and then that person will be able to continue to log in. Other elements here, obviously time zone. You saw that I hadn't changed the company time zone. So if Rachel's in Mountain Time, which I am, I can go in and I scroll down and I can change that now to Denver. So I can update. If I do it at the company information, I don't have to do it each time. See, ways to try to save you a little bit of time. And again, why is that important? If people are using events, they're using tasks, they want to know and make sure that those reminders are set appropriately, then we need to obviously have the right time zone. Um, MFA questions. So we get a lot of those from our service team that they changed phones. They can't log in. The MFA is not letting them continue. Some of these features allow us to disconnect so they can reconnect to a new authenticator. And simply by checking boxes here, clicking on these, or generating temporary passcodes, right, will allow us to help that user reset. We also can change passwords. So if someone gets locked out, sometimes Salesforce gets in this, kind of spiral feedback loop of not letting you reset. Okay. So this is where you as a system admin could go in and push the reset button. It's going to engage that, email automation, that automated email out to the user to prompt them to then reset their password. When you email our service team, they're going in, finding the user, and hitting the button. Okay, so it's that simple. All right. Other settings, I'll let you go through, but those are kind of the key ones when we're looking at this page in general. And again, it's a lot, but it's important to know that some of these, again, because they're for global Salesforce users, are not going to be used. Other thing that because I have, type A personality, I like to go in when I'm adding a new user and put in some type of a kind of a nickname. By default, that gobbledygook number is what Salesforce will set that if you do not change it. Okay, so top end, basic information you're going to look through, obviously username, email. We have our nickname, obviously the company's attached, our time zone. We're going to talk about license and profiles here in a minute, but managing our MFA. So those are active users. Just looking at my notes here. Okay, so when we go to add a new user, I go back to my users, I have a new user button at the top right. So just like anything, right, it's going to tell us, Salesforce is going to tell us what's required. We've got required fields, and instead of an asterisk, they're giving us it in red. So those are the minimum fields required to get a new user set up. You will notice first name isn't required. So in situations where you want to create maybe a company-wide email, like a default for a group, you may be, you'll only have to put the last name, right? It's going to set up a default, and I could do team here if I wanted, and this is where I'm going to add my email and my user. My nickname, if I would like to add that as well. And so again, when I hit save, if my email is my username is already taken, it's going to tell me that I have to choose a different one. More importantly, though, over on the top right, this is where we start getting complicated because we have a layering effect that occurs within Salesforce. When I create a new user, the baseline of setting up a user is we have to start with adding a Salesforce license because we're getting them into Salesforce first. So roles we're not going to talk about too much today. That's for kind of a higher level, more complex org, and you can leave it as unspecified. But the user license is the first step. We have to designate one of the two Salesforce licenses that we sell. If you buy it through Salesforce, if you're an ISV, same thing. You're still buying those licenses, and there's typically two types of license that you're buying. I mentioned this before. Salesforce is what they call it, which is the full license, and Salesforce platform. So 90% of your users are going to be on the Salesforce platform. System admins are going to be on the Salesforce, and your sales team is going to be on Salesforce because they have to have access to more than the baseline. Okay. I'm going to give you an overview of the steps. There's up to 6 steps to add a user. It's really important to note. Okay. First step, you go in, you have to assign a license. I have to decide. I'll talk through that in a minute. Second step is I have to assign a profile. Profile is baseline access to objects and features. So once I have a license assigned, I have to pick a particular profile. Then when I save this, I'm not going to save it, cancel. I'm going to go into one that's already created. Sign the license, sign the profile. Then I have to go in and assign a permission setting, and I can have multiple. That's additional access. So license is just getting into the system. Profile is giving me baseline, bare minimum access to basic objects and features. Permissions gives us even more access, so it's additive. In my brain, when I first started working in Salesforce, it made more sense for stuff to be taken away from a user. And that's not how Salesforce works. It's additive. So we start with the bare minimum access. Can't see anything, can't do anything, right? Just a license. Then I add a profile that gives me a little bit more access. Oh, now I can see accounts and contacts and leads and opportunities. And then permission sets give me even more access. Oh, now I can see the Benelinx, custom objects, etc., right? So that's step number 3. Step number 4 is I have to scroll all the way down on the page. I have to assign a package license. That's step number 4. If you don't assign a Benelinx package, you can't see Benelinx stuff, but it's way at the bottom. So that's number 4. Number 5 is I have to assign Einstein, which is our Outlook and Gmail integration. That's 5. And then if you have a complex structure, you may have to assign groups and queues. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. So Salesforce is working on doing some automation. So they're going to help us, help you, help us so that we can set up some flows so that it'll automatically do these. But right now it's manual. And it's important to know what each one of those do. Again, for those of you that have been through our onboarding, that user matrix is critical. Every single thing we do, we have columns, right? What's your license? What's your profile? What's your permission settings? Did we sign Einstein so they can get into their Outlook, integration or Gmail? Oh, what about Conga? What about Benelinx? The list can go on, and we have to go through and we have to add every single one of those components to our users, or they won't be able to see and access and have visibility. They may not get email communication, etc. Okay, so let's go back and talk about licenses. So the first and most important is the initial, what Salesforce license do I give people access to go into the system at all? I mentioned this. I'm going to go and click on this link maybe. It's in my email. Maybe. Come on. Oops. There we go. We're going to add this to our website. We're updating our the Benelinx website. It's going to have a lot of contract information. It's going to have our new service agreements. And we're going to add this because I think this is really important. So when we talked about what two licenses are you buying, if you're an ISV client directly through Salesforce, or which ones are we reselling to you? Salesforce has renamed their licenses several times now, but the platform license is the starter suite. Okay, so that is the baseline minimum required license for sales for Benelinx, sorry, to function and work. So bare minimum of what we need on the platform for you to then access Benelinx and do all the things you need, which is good because it keeps that price point low. So this is the platform license that I was just showing you. And down here, what they call the Salesforce license is the enterprise. Pricing, obviously this is shelf rates, but when you scroll down, the other piece that I want to highlight is if you're wondering, well, what do I get for the starter suite or that platform license versus the enterprise? This is really helpful. It tells me what I have access to and what I don't. And if we continue, the list goes on, right? I can continue to expand and it just keeps growing. So if you ever wanted to know what am I buying and what is the difference between those base Salesforce licenses, this is nothing to do with Benelinx. You can see and you can compare and contrast what the differences are. We built Benelinx on that starter platform license because it's the lowest level, least expensive to add Benelinx into, which keeps our overall pricing affordable. If you want additional, right, you want that enhanced, that enterprise, then that's for the system admin, that's for our sales team. And you can see, overall, looking at the feature comparison is what's going to give you the details here. So this is a great link. We can also share, it's going to be in the PowerPoint, but we're also going to be adding it to our site. So when I pivot back to this, where do I assign those? And you can see right here. You're going to choose either the Salesforce, which is equal to enterprise, more expensive, or platform, less expensive. Most of your users are going to go on the platform. And I had shown you way down here, if I want to know how many I've purchased, I can pivot here and it's going to tell me right there. How many of the Salesforce licenses did I buy? How many platform? And how many are currently in use? That's why I showed you that first. Hopefully this is helpful. So to get into the system at all, first thing we got to do, we got to assign the license and we got to assign the correct one, right? The more expensive license, we're obviously we're going to save for our sales team and or our system admins. Everybody else is going on platform. Second level is our profile. Baseline profile. I don't like this user because it's my system admin. New user. Okay. Baseline license. All these other ones you can ignore. It's either Salesforce or platform. Then the next thing I have to do is assign a profile. And you can see that I can only assign one profile to one user. That's one of the big limitations on profiles. I heard a rumor Salesforce is actually going to get rid of profiles instead of and only have permission settings. But for now, we have to assign at least one. We have our standard platform user, which is the default that comes with the Salesforce licenses. And then we have Benelinx, which we've made some modifications to. So most situations, you're going to pick the Benelinx. But it's important to know we only get to pick one. So we need to know what the differences are between those profiles, and we can only assign one. Okay. If I pivot over, I'm going to open up a new tab here. If I want to see the list of profiles, right? Oops, I did that too soon. I can go to under my users. You can see I can start breaking apart all of these different pieces, and I can click right on profiles. And now I can see the list. Okay, and you can see, oh, okay, I've got platform, different types of access, then my system admin. Or if we have folks that have the sales, we're going to give them the standard user, which is kind of a third profile. Okay, so important to know, one per one. I will also note, we're going to talk about this next week, but profiles are how we enable our lightning pages. So having the right profile set for our users is really important. A for baseline access, but also then for our lightning pages. If we have to flip and add profiles after the fact, we have to go in and reassign every lightning page because all the lightning pages are dependent on our profile. So we want to get that set correctly to start. Okay. And when I say baseline access profiles, 99.9% of what is managed in the profile are going to be your standard Salesforce objects, accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities. Custom objects that Benelinx provides are going to be enabled in our permission sets. So profile, baseline access, core objects, and then when we want to add access to our custom objects, like policies, services, action, everything to the right. Accounts and contacts are Salesforce's objects, and we share them. Okay, we don't own them, they do. Everything else Benelinx built. So if we want to have access to policy services, et cetera, in our user base, we have to not only assign the profile, we have to go down and make sure we've assigned our permission sets. Big differences in permission sets is I'm giving additional access, so it's additive. So whatever I gave access to at the profile, I don't have to give access again in the permission set. It's more, it's additional. Okay. So I don't have to go in and update information in the permission set for accounts and contacts if I already gave access at the profile. So a lot of permission sets are going to be based on additional access for managed packages, which is Benelinx, additional features like the Einstein activity. If we want to give our users access to go into the Outlook integration or Gmail, we have to give them additional. Other benefits of permission sets is I can have many. I think this is why Salesforce is pivoting. So you can see, I can go, oh, I want to give Rachel access to this. And then tomorrow, oops, I added a new feature. I want to give her additional access. Oh, I can add another permission set, give that additional access for that feature, and I can add that permission set here. So I can give many. It lets us, I think, an easier way for us to micromanage the access, right, with some of these additional add-ons. Bare minimum, when we add users through Benelinx, for Benelinx, license, profile, we have to add our Benelinx permissions. And again, if I go to my permission listing, I can either see Benelinx only or I can see all. And obviously the Benelinx permissions are going to be noted. I'm going to have to speed up a little bit. So that was step number 3. License, profile, permissions. Then, like I mentioned, at the very bottom, we have to give the Benelinx license. So technically every single user has 2 different licenses, not 4, 2, right? So if you're an ISV client, you're going and buying Salesforce licenses from Salesforce up here, license access. And in addition, you're deciding who is then going to have access to the Benelinx managed package. So for most of our users, we have to add 2 different types of license, the Salesforce license and the Benelinx. We have to make sure we go all the way to the bottom and assign licenses here. Okay. One thing I want to mention is if we want to see the managed packages, you can see I can add licenses, or I can go back and I can remove. When we go in reverse, when I'm removing a user, I have to remove the Benelinx license, or it's going to show an inactive user with a Benelinx license that needs to be made available. So this whole time we've been in the user and user. I showed you the user, how I can create a new user. We talked about profiles. I showed you the list at least to start. Minimum access are going to be our standard objects from Salesforce. Permissions are going to be additive. If I need to give access to Benelinx, I got to add a permission and a license. If I'm adding Conga, I'm going to have to add a Conga permission and a license. Okay. Einstein up here, Einstein activity. I got to add that permission so that they can get added to the Einstein activity for them to be able to use the Outlook integration. I'm going to pivot now away from the user settings because I need to show you where Einstein is, some of these add-ons, so you can find it easier. Can't spell. E-I-N-S-T-E-I-N. Okay. Einstein is the blanket, kind of category for all AI. And Einstein activity capture under settings is where I'm going to go to see my configuration. We set up this up for all of our users. If I reset this, I can decide if it's Microsoft 365 or Gmail. That's already done. If anything changes, you could go in and reset your configuration. But if I pivot to the configurations, I can open up and I can edit the configurations. This is where, see where I've got my user here? If I don't give the user the Einstein permission set, they won't show up here. And then manual, this is step 5, I have to go into this setting, right? Einstein activity down here to settings, and I have to move a new user from available to selected. If I don't do that, they don't have access, right? So that's a step in adding a new user. Is adding the Einstein permission, but also going into the configuration and moving them from available to selected. All the defaults are already set, and I simply save. Okay, so adding a new user, that's an important step. All of our service folks are going into every one of these and determining profile, permission, license, Einstein, right? Manage package. That's why there's a lot of steps. That was 5. Okay. Make sure we go into that. If I go into the manage package, if I want to see, oops, make a package here. If I want to see the managed packages I have inside my Salesforce instance. This is a Salesforce org. Benelinx is a managed package. I try to use that language so we get comfortable with the fact that we're a piece, right? We drop in our code, our package into the Salesforce ecosystem. We are a managed package, just like all the other managed packages on the App Exchange. We're just a very large one. If I want to see what packages are installed in my org, I can click on, you can go down, find the apps, but installed packages is where it's going to take me and I can see which managed packages are in the system, right? I'm giving you that visibility and understanding of how all these pieces come together when I'm adding a user, removing, and how do I see the more details. User, but I can go into Einstein activity. I can also go and see what managed packages I have. Okay, I'm going to show you in one more app before we leave today. And now I can see, oh, I've got Cloud Maven. We talked about that. We've got that installed in our trial org. So we can go and see that secure email. Great. I can see the number of licenses allowed and issued. Just like when I go to the company information, I can see my managed package licenses here. Benelinx, I can see how many I have allowed, how many have I used. Conga Composer, how many have I allowed, how many are used. If I want to manage the licenses within Benelinx, I can go in and I can see my list and I can add users and I can remove them. This is where you're going to go and release that license when a user is let go or deactivated. Just like the 5 or 6 steps when I'm adding a user, when I have a user that leaves, I have to go in and deactivate them and I have to release this license or it's going to show that person still as an active user in Benelinx. Every time I add a user, I have 2 different sets of licenses, Salesforce and Benelinx, at least. Okay. I'm going to come back to the queues and the groups in a minute. Okay. So this is where we go, see the package. If I go back to my user, If I want to remove, I told you I can't do it here because this is a system admin. I simply edit and I uncheck and save. Instantaneously, they don't have access. People think that's it. I don't have to worry about removing the profile. I do not have to worry about that. I do not have to worry about removing the permission sets, but I have to worry about removing the licenses for my managed packages. I need to release that license so it moves from used to available. Just like I'm moving the license when I deactivate the Salesforce license from used to available. So there's two steps when I remove a user: deactivate and release the license for your managed package licenses. And I can do that by going down and removing it right here. Okay. There are ways to mass assign. So if you have 20, 30, 50, you're like, oh, heavens to Betsy. I have to go do this one at a time. There's ways to mass create users. There's ways to mass assign permissions indirectly. So I can manage assignments here and I can add a whole truckload of people at once. So you don't have to, punch away at one at a time. But the overall concept is the assignment responsibilities are the same. License, profile, those kind of go together, right? One and one. Then we have permission settings. What do I need to add? Access for users, right? Do I add access to the commissions app? You saw ours. Not everybody needs a commission app, right? If I add this permission to a user, they can now see the commission app and all the objects under the commission app. Do I want people to be able to delete or not delete? Oh, I add different permissions so they can not only see, but I can manage that security and segregation. What can they do when they see it? Maybe it's read only. Maybe it's, they can edit, but they can't delete. Conga has their own set, right? Because again, they're a managed package. Einstein, we need to make sure we have that assignment as well. So permissions. And then at the very bottom, don't forget the Benelinx managed package or any of your managed packages. Undoing, deactivate, and remove. I think I've said that enough times. All right. Additional features I talked about. I already showed you Einstein. Again, you can go and scroll down. I can't spell it. Sorry. Must be my cold. Einstein activity. It's pulling up all the Einsteins. I can jump to the settings here. I can see the configuration. I can see additional settings. I can see my users. That's where I'm managing that. I showed you the package. Again, these are the key words, right? If I know the words, I can get there quickly. Installed packages. Here are the managed packages. You can see you can uninstall. That can be important. If you're playing around with adding maybe a free app from the App Exchange, I do that. You can install it, test it out. You're like, don't like it. Uninstall it. Some of those really small applications you can add and then remove. I recommend doing that in a sandbox, not in production, but you can uninstall here. Okay. One other feature I want to share today, real quick, is the app manager. When we go through system admin training, this is your app that you're in, right? There's multiple apps depending on what you're buying. This is the app I'm in. It tells me, and maybe I want to manage what the app looks like. Okay. If I go back, wherever I was. Nope, nope, nope. Here we go. So if I go in and I go to in the home and I go to the app manager, this is where you can see all the different apps. Some you have access, some you don't. But we have our agency management app that is managed, and then we have other apps. You can see client-specific app, commissions app, your sales app down here, right? And so this is where you can go in to those specific apps and see a couple things. If I go into edit, this is the client-specific app, right? On the left-hand side, I can control certain variables. I can change the logo, the color, I can assign it, and it's going to make that visible. Other important things. What do I want default objects on my navigation bar? This is where we set those. If you don't want it that order and you want it this order, this is where you can do that, and this is going to be the default for all your users. Other really important thing is we started making custom apps for our clients. Oops, sorry. There you go. And the reason is if you have added additional apps like Ring Central or something, some other add-on or integration or additional app that needs this utility function, it's not available in ours. So we've built custom apps for folks. This is where there's a little pop-up when the phone rings, it pops up and says, there's a call. Do you want to take it? So there's a lot of use cases for this utility, but this is where you would add that if you're adding in like a phone system. So just wanted to share a couple additional areas within this long, very large home. The user area is the one that we went through most in most detail today. Other areas you may go into, which is Einstein, Quick Find, or scroll down and find it, the app manager, and the packages. That's where I can go see the managed packages and see my user count. Told you I'd take up an hour. I'm really good at that. Um, and this is why next session, we're going to dedicate the entire time to the object manager. This is the fun part. Ooh, Rachel's going to show me next time what? I'm going to show you how I can go into an object and I can update fields. I can add fields. I can remove fields from my page layout. I can update my lightning pages. I can decide what buttons I want to see. Ooh, fun stuff, right? Most of the things we're going to talk about next week are going to be in the top 5 tabs. Anywhere that I go in the object manager, I was in the account object. If I go down to contacts, not to be mistaken for contracts. And you can see the same menu. We're going to go through every one of these at the top. Stuff at the bottom gets a little more complicated, but we're going to at least give you the top 5, and that's going to give you a lot of control over visibility. What fields, what do I want to see on the page? How do I organize the page? Enabling lightning or lightning pages, making the fields dynamic, the if then, oh, if I check this box, then this field appears. Oh, great. You're going to show me how I can see that. So I can make adjustments if I want. We are going to make sure that we cautiously proceed. One thing that Salesforce has not updated, we have 90% of our system has lightning pages enabled now. It's a massive improvement. We can do so much with these lightning pages. So we've got them enabled for you. If you accidentally delete a lightning page, Salesforce has yet to have a way for us to retrieve them. So if they get deleted, they're gone. So just things we'll talk about next week, but a lot of control of being able to design how your system looks and feels. And a lot of things that we do are going to be in this object manager. Today we covered the home page. We are out of time. And so just lastly, want to note for next session. Oops, I'm going to skip through. This is going to be available if you want to go through the presentation, but next session is going to be focusing on that object manager, same place, same time in 2 weeks. All right. I don't know if we have any questions, but we're out of time. We will follow up if people do have questions. Looks like we have a couple here. Okay. Thank you guys again. We'll see you in 2 weeks and we'll go into the fun object manager. All right. Have a good day. Take care.